So we'll talk a little bit more now about what actually opportunity zones are and what kind of benefits they provide, both to investors and taxpayers, but also to communities. So first, kind of we'll go through the who, what, where, why, how of opportunity zones. So who are the OZ investors? These are anyone who has a capital gain. So the only type of equity that is available for the OZ benefit are capital gains. So simply put, individuals or corporations, kind of anyone who has a capital gain is qualified to be an OZ investor. You also have to, have that equity capital. So that is another fundamental aspect of opportunity zones. But again, as you can see here, individuals, corporations, private equity, institutional investors, banks and landowners, all of those folks, if they generate a capital gain, are eligible to put that capital gain into an opportunity fund and invest that and receive a series of benefits if they meet kind of certain timelines and certain criteria. So where are OZs? Back in 2018, shortly after the overall tax reform package was passed, that included opportunity zones. Governors had about 3 months at the beginning of that year to designate 25% of all eligible low-income communities to be opportunity zones. In the first round, that definition was essentially the same as new markets, the new markets tax credit. That's changed slightly. We'll get into that in a little bit. And so that has led us to a map of about 8,700 opportunity zones across the country and every state and all of the territories as well. We are preparing now to do the same thing again. And in this now permanent part of opportunity zones, these maps will last for 10 full years. The current map as well also will last until 2028. So it has a 10-year window as well. What that effectively will mean is that there will be an overlap for 2 years from 2027 and 2028 of the first map that will remain active through the end of 2028. And this new map that you all are embarking on the process of designating that will become live January 1, 2027. That will, of course, go into effect through the end of 2036. So there will be kind of a 2-year overlap as well. What we often say here is that the nomination process, the selection process that we're talking about today, is the kind of fundamental, most important way in which communities can really be part of the process and drive capital, to priority places, for the next decade. So it's a really, really, important and sort of ground laying kind of work to make sure that this incentive is successful across the state. So what are the 3 kind of primary benefits for investors? One, and I'll kind of talk about it more from what's to come in 2.0. So this has changed the structure of the incentive, while kind of the basic incentives have remained the same from 1.0 going into 2.0. The structure has changed a little bit. So I'll just kind of focus on what we can expect in 2.0. There will be a standard kind of 5-year deferral on all kind of initial capital gains taxes. So again, if you recognize a capital gain and then you invest that in an opportunity fund, from that date of investment, you have a deferral on paying those taxes for 5 years. And that has become standardized. If you hold that investment for that standard 5-year deferral, then you would get a 10% step up in basis, essentially a 10% discount once on your tax bill once that comes due at the end of that 5-year period. In rural areas, and this is again a new facet of the permanent policy, in rural areas that has actually been bumped up to 30%. So that's a pretty significant discount after that 5-year deferral period. And then the permanent exclusion has very much remained the same as the most valuable part of the overall benefit structure. Essentially, any appreciation on the OZ investment itself, if you hold that OZ investment for 10 years, you will not have to pay taxes on any appreciation of that OZ investment. So again, if you've kind of been patient and sort of this is meant to reward patient capital, and you have kind of invested in a qualifying and economically additive investment for those 10 years, and if that appreciates in value, you will not have to pay taxes at the end of that period. So some important elements about how OZs work as well. It's important to note that this is very different while we complementary and certainly meant to be complementary to existing tax credit programs and other programs like New Markets and LIHTC and others. That is not a tax credit program. It is simply an incentive. And so what that means is that it does not guarantee investment. This is very much a market-based kind of incentive. And so, investors will go where they see opportunity, where they where they are aligned in sort of their and how they want to invest, but it is by no means guaranteed. It is, as I mentioned, kind of rewarding investment in these low-income communities by increasing potential returns on successful investments. So again, if this investment is successful at that end of the 10-year period, that's certainly where you'll see a much bigger benefit. Equity capital is is again a very I think unique facet of opportunity zones, whereas a lot of other tax credit programs are more focused on debt financing. And while that is certainly a vital part of most of the capital stacks we see with opportunity zones, OZs provide a really necessary and often harder to find piece of the capital stack by focusing on the equity portion, of these investments. And what we've mostly seen OZs used for are building brand new structures. So kind of what we call original use, taking a vacant piece of, parcel, for example, and building a new building on that, rehabilitating old buildings. That is another pathway toward a qualifying project. Though you have to really put a lot of money into it. You have to double your basis, in order to be considered substantially improved. But that is definitely one thing that, a very common aspect of how we've seen opportunity zones used. And then it's also could be used for acquiring equipment, for example, as well. So these are some basic kind of ways in which we often see OZs work. So a little bit on what's new. We've already kind of covered some of the changes with the incentive structure. Essentially, that standardized 5-year deferral from date of investment, that is the new part. There's always been a deferral on taxes, but in the previous version of OZs 1.0, there were some kind of timelines attached to that. And essentially, the end of the deferral and investment window for 1.0 is ending at the end of this year. And so all of those timelines kind of attached to the end of this year and this time and the end of 2026. And so, you had, if you wanted to get a step up in basis benefit, you had to help, if held for 7 years, you had to invest at the end of 2019. If you wanted to get a benefit that was attached to a 5-year holding period, you would have to have invested by the end of 2021. What that obviously that rewarded people who were able to get in early, and in some cases who felt comfortable getting in early even before the final regs were done at the end of 2019. And so this is a much, I think, hopefully a better way of standardizing and smoothing out the flow of capital over the course of the policy's lifetime now, by standardizing that 5-year deferral for every investment, time to the date of investment. So that is a very welcome change and one that we recommended kind of from the get-go as well. As I mentioned, also, there's a significant increase in the benefits for rural investments. This is very much intentional by Congress. We've seen a lot of investments into more urban and suburban kind of areas with OZs, less so with rural. It's still been significant, and we've seen about $6 billion, at least that we know of, based on kind of dated Treasury data into rural communities. However, it's definitely been a much lower overall percentage of the market than urban investments, and so Congress wanted to sort of rebalance that a little bit. Hence, the increased benefits for rural from 10% to 30% in terms of that discount. There's also some lowered thresholds for that substantial improvement test that I mentioned earlier. That has been halved essentially. So you only have to put, for example, if you bought, a building for $1 million, and then you only have to put $500,000 into that instead of $1 million. I think that will be very helpful for certain rehabilitation projects in rural areas as well. One thing that we were really excited about, because this, I think, was very much a top priority for many, many organizations and groups, really since the inception of OZs, was having more reporting and transparency. So that right now, a lot of the data that we're reporting is based on the last Treasury report that has data through 2022. That's a really long time ago. It would be great to have more contemporaneous data, not only for us as researchers, but also for you all, to get a better sense of how this is working, in your communities in real time. We will now have that, or at least, hopefully we'll have a lot more contemporaneous data available by Treasury, because they are now going to be required to produce an annual report to Congress with some of this kind of baseline data that will help us better understand where investments are going and into what. And as I mentioned in the previous kind of OZ 1.0, the criteria for what constitutes a low-income community very much aligned with the new market tax credit definition, which is essentially 20% of poverty or higher, poverty rate or higher, or at 80% of MFI or lower. And you could qualify on either of those two criteria. Congress made the decision to tighten that a bit, especially on the median family income side. That has been reduced from 80% to 70%. They also got rid of contiguous tracts, which were a kind of small percentage of tracts that were higher income that were allowed to be kind of adjacent to OZs. They got rid of that as well. And so what that will lead us to is a more distressed, but also a much smaller map of about overall kind of 20% smaller in terms of the number of eligible zones this time around than we had last time around. So just a few kind of key things to keep in mind as we go through the rest of the presentation. OZ investment is very flexible in who can use it. Again, anyone with that capital gain, how much you can invest. There is no kind of line item in a budget. There's no appropriated funds. This is very much a market-based with no cap. So that can also mean, it could be a large investment, small investment, and also there's no kind of limitation on how much you can invest from sort of the government standpoint, and what it goes towards. So it can go into something that's new or improved, but as long as it's economically additive and in a zone, it's likely going to qualify. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you could put this to use. So where there's a place for equity investment, there is an opening generally for OZ capital. And I wanted to just share a few kind of examples of investments across the state as well, in Baltimore, specifically in Baltimore. So let's see, in the Brewers Hill, so this is the Lucy apartment complex. This is a $1 billion, 500-unit mixed-use placemaking effort. Yard 56, many of you probably know this. For us, at least, this feels like a famous OZ investment because I think it was one of the first, if not like the first, certainly in the state. A great example of a revitalization of a formerly brownfield site that completely kind of took the sort of vacant or underutilized parcels and put that together into now a very kind of vibrant revitalization effort. And the OZ capital portion, I think, was like a long-standing effort that OZs were able to come in and sort of help finally close that capital stack and like get that off the ground. In downtown, so this is actually a hotel to affordable and workforce housing conversion done by the folks over at Arcturus Impact Investors. And then in Penn North, this is Elevate, another great kind of impact investing firm with extremely affordable units and spaces for multiple community businesses in the heart of that Penn North neighborhood. So just to kind of give some illustrative examples of exactly what we were talking about and sort of how OZs can be used in the flexible use cases here, this is a good example, at least within Baltimore, of exactly how that flexibility is sort of on display here. And I think with that, maybe, oh, no, I have one more, sorry. Okay, so just a little bit of a what worked, what kind of sort of worked, and what did not work. Again, I think these are maybe helpful, more tangible kind of examples, or at least categories, that we can keep in mind as we go into sort of how to think about picking opportunity zones, successfully. So what worked, definitely multifamily rental housing. That is the median use case for opportunity zones, full stop. This is new and refurbished, but multifamily rental housing has definitely been the most successful use case for OZs. Workforce housing, so kind of unsubsidized, but still at that sort of 80% to 120% of AMI. That is a really great use for OZs as well. We've seen that used in many different types of communities across the country. Same with mixed use developments. So we see a lot of additional, housing, but also with some of that commercial space, on the bottom floor, things like that. That's been very popular and very, hopefully overall very successful. Adaptive reuse and historical rehabilitations. Again, just straight commercial real estate. We've seen definitely a lot of that as well. It's probably the biggest additional category behind residential. And then the semi-urban kind of suburban infill, that's been where we've seen OZs particularly thrive as well. What's kind of worked are deeply affordable housing. We've certainly seen it done. It's not as easy. It definitely takes a lot of and especially if you want to tie it or pair it with LIHTC or new markets. It's doable. We've definitely seen it done, but I think it takes a little bit more elbow grease to sort of to see those sort of pencil out and actually come to fruition. We have seen some rural industrial and commercial development. And again, I think with the rural provisions coming up in 2.0, we may see a lot more of that, but it's been fairly limited. And I think that's just generally, we've seen more limited uptake in rural places. And we have not seen as much CDFI or impact sector engagement. I think, again, we've seen some really great CDFI investments, but they're not happening, I think, at the scale at which we'd like to see. And especially, I think the CDFI community, given how mission aligned they are, would like to see as well. Where it does not work, and I think these are particularly important as you're thinking about, the types of places to designate, single family homes does not work. So we, as of right now, at least, there's some efforts underway to see if there can be some policy changes to help make that work, but that would require policy change. And so as of right now, anything that requires kind of an immediate sale, an immediate changing of hands of that investment before that 10-year window is up, that's going to be challenging because you're going to interrupt the investor benefits, right? And you're not able to kind of recycle that capital. For that same reason, that's why we haven't seen a lot of venture capital, into kind of startup and high growth businesses work either, because again, most venture capital firms don't want to wait 10 years. They want to do it in 5 or 7 years, or at least not even be tied down at all by any sort of timeline, and allow the sort of best situation for the business to actually dictate when they get in or out of an investment. And so for that reason, because of that inability to recycle capital, single family homes or just for sale homes generally, and venture style type equity investments have typically not worked at scale, or either not at all in the case of single family homes. And I think in general, for businesses, some are willing to take the risk, but on the whole, it doesn't happen. We don't see a lot of as direct, you can't do really direct investment into small businesses. You have to go through an opportunity fund. So I think that's a critical piece to this. And so we have seen, certainly business investments, but again, those haven't happened at the scale that we'd like to. And I think a lot because of that inability to recycle capital. Because you have to have capital gains, we don't have as much of this kind of retail investor participation. The capital gains requirement sort of is limiting just by definition and sort of who can participate. Again, we haven't had a lot of that widespread rural investment, but we expect that will change. Same thing with transparency. The reporting and transparency requirements that are meant to start this taxable year will hopefully really change the game on that as well. All right, so I think with that, I can officially turn it over to Kenan to take us through the zone designations and some of the sort of key principles for that process.
Yeah, thanks so much, Catherine and Brad, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So I'm happy to kind of carry us down into the tactical here. It's a deep dive into zone designations. Let's kick off with why communities should care about this. Why does it matter for you, this capital gains tax incentive? How can it actually benefit your communities and the folks that you represent? And there are, a number of good reasons here, as you can see on the slide. So OZs can, first, they can help close deals and get really good projects off the ground. The example that Catherine shared at Yard 56 there in Baltimore, it's a nice example of a project that had a lot of, people and intention and thought behind it, but they just couldn't get the financing over the finish line until the OZ incentive came along and actually was able to tip the calculus into positive territory and now bring, a thriving mixed-use development with a local grocery store and all sorts of amenities and things to this community. So OZ, capital can really be catalytic for those big kind of community-backed projects. OZs can also drive infill development and kind of complete the neighborhood fabric. All American cities and towns of all sizes are, ringed with plots and parcels and areas and districts that have kind of been gone underutilized and have really latent potential that is just kind of waiting to be activated. And OZs aren't going to activate all those, but OZs will activate a lot of them because this, again, it's a marginal tax incentive, but that's enough to kind of make investment into, especially some of these kind of gaps in the fabric of a city or a neighborhood or a town, really economically viable again. OZs can also help mobilize local reinvestment or local vesting efforts. Even though we haven't seen wide-scale retail investor participation, we have seen a lot of, or we know that capital gains are everywhere. We know that, in any community, there are likely hundreds, if it's a small one, thousands to tens of thousands, if it's a larger one, of individuals who are realizing capital gains every year, of businesses who are located in the town and business owners who have capital gains. And, OZs kind of provide a nice federal push and impetus to, think, oh, wait, maybe I can reinvest and do well as I do that in my community. And where we've seen some of the most high impact projects through OZs across the country, it's been where local folks kind of use OZs as a local vesting vehicle. OZs can help directly address the housing shortages I suspect all of your communities are facing at all price levels, right? It's flexible, it's market-based, no one's dictating, exactly what OZ investors invest in, as long as it meets the rules and requirements of the regulations. So that means, it does market rate, it does workforce, and it does affordable, and, a wide variety of types therein. We do expect that the rural incentives, the early market signals are that those will, meaningfully boost commercial, industrial, and hopefully housing investment in rural areas too. So OZs can become more of a catalyst for economic development, hopefully, in very well-chosen, well-cited rural census tracts. And then in general, OZs are a tool. And you should view the zone designation process as an occasion to try to put more power and more private capital behind your plans. So, if you have area master plans or revitalization plans, or mega sites that you've been cultivating for a long time, aligning an OZ designation with them could be a really great way to, again, kind of help ensure and nudge the private market to meet all the effort that you've been putting in with actual investment on the ground. So we're encouraging everyone who's kind of going through the tract selection process, because you do have to, by nature, narrow down from what's eligible and only nominate a quarter of that, which is pretty strict cut. We're encouraging a three-part test for folks to adopt. So one, it's a community test. Is this, by that we mean, is this a genuinely high need community that warrants, the public subsidy that an OZ designation represents? Can you responsibly, designate this tract as a steward of the public trust? And two, not only is it high need and merit a good selection on the merits, but does it also pass a market test? As Catherine mentioned, these are not guarantee zones. Private sector, private actors, and investors have to find good investment opportunities in the OZs for the designation to actually mean anything or unlock activity. So you do want to kind of find a Goldilocks zones that both meet the need, spirit, and intent of OZs, but also have those viable investment opportunities for this to be a good match to really catalyze development going forward. And then three, a policy test. Are local policies, at the municipal and county level, are they conducive and friendly to economic development? Have you undergone steps to make it easier to build? OZ investors really have to deploy their capital and can build structures and units and all on pretty strict timelines. So that means they're very sensitive to certainty to permitting and zoning processes. So have you made it easy such that capital can come in on the timelines it needs or not? So some key questions as you're kind of looking at your maps. Where do you wish to channel development? What are the priority corners for revitalization, economic revitalization in your communities? Going deeper, you can think, where have you recently invested in infrastructure? So place public capital in the hope that private capital will follow, or where have you enacted zoning reform? And an OZ designation can help those steps that you've taken pay off. Think through what are your core anchor assets in census tracts that are eligible, that might be kind of nodes or clusters for more investment to follow in on, and which tracts are going to be primed for housing and commercial development. Those might be different tracts, and you might want to make sure that you're nominating kind of a diverse portfolio of census tracts locally. But on that housing point, it's important to keep in mind what Catherine mentioned on single-family homes. The OZ incentive in single-family home building is not a very good match. So if you have a census tract that's basically already built out and exclusively zoned for single-family housing, even if it's low-income community, there's probably very little that the OZ incentive can do in that area. So it's probably best to save your designation for somewhere else where it might be zoned for a mix of uses or more dense housing development, such as apartment buildings. And then, also think through things like, where might there be opportunities for workforce housing along key transit corridors? Where might you be kind of hoping to nudge population growth within your footprint? And then lastly, where do you have land that could be contributed to high impact projects? Because that is a great way, kind of site control of land is a great way for the public sector to be able to kind of show up to the table as an active partner, bringing an asset of value to investors or developers to help really high impact projects get off the ground. Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, just across the border to the north there, has a nice integrated opportunity zone and local zoning map platform that I think it's great for other communities to emulate, because you can show very quickly which census tracts are maybe a cemetery surrounded by one small single family housing neighborhood, so it might not be a good OZ census tract for obvious reasons. So you can as you're down selecting, you can go look for areas that are zoned for activities, and if you can layer on vacant parcels, brownfield sites, etc., that was even more powerful. And Washington, D.C. Also had a really nice zone designation process that any city, town, county can also emulate from OZ 1.0. And they ended up just with a set of census tracts that had been extremely well vetted by the public and had also been filtered for signals of market activity and commercial interest as well. So that's another, these slides will be shared later, so I'll let you dig deep then, but that's another place to look for inspiration about how other peers have done this. So to kind of close our suite, I'd like to share some thoughts on not just on looking past the zone designation process. These zones are going to be effective for 10 years, and help you think through what comes after and what tools are going to be at your disposal over the long term to influence outcomes in OZs. And here you can start with thinking through, what might you as a local government and public sector entity be able to contribute to projects? So one, you can help the process and help make yourself more attractive to investment by smoothing and streamlining the permitting and approvals process. That's a nice kind of low cost way to engage here. And we had one example recently of the city of Miami down in Florida. They created they have an affordable housing kind of tax credit and set off and subsidy program that they aligned with OZs, which we can follow up over in chat too, as a nice example of just kind of aligning their affordable housing toolkit, but an investor incentive to produce affordable housing with OZs in a very kind of a way that was easily kind of grafted onto the market. Where might you have publicly owned land, as I mentioned before, and you can either sell that, contribute that to projects, or lease it to high impact projects just for a nominal fee. And then, thinking over the long term, how might you be able to drive, investment towards impact? So one, that can be done if the market can support it with kind of inclusionary zoning programs. You can also layer on top Main Street and small business grant programs to help local entrepreneurs take advantage of the business opportunities that are created by new real estate development and new population growth. And as we'll see in some of the next slides, some capacity building and ecosystem development grants just to help kind of connect OZ investors with community needs and community actors to make sure that incoming investment really does deliver on well-being for residents. So in that vein, one of our favorite OZ impact case studies comes from the great state of Alabama, a new organization called Opportunity Alabama, which formed really to help make sure that this decentralized federal capital gains tax incentive for investors did actually lead to meaningful outcomes for small communities in the most distressed corners of rural Alabama. And they did that. This entity both helps kind of build capacity with local communities, helps them prepare project prospectuses and do pre-development work to present to investors. And it's helped cultivate a local investment base of people, with capital gains rooted in the state and in rural communities across the state, and interested and dedicated to reinvesting in opportunities kind of in their backyards. Another nice impact case study comes from Frederick, Maryland. This was an early OZ investment in 2019, and you can see with the capital stack broken out there on the right, how OZs really do come in as a block with a bunch of other resources to here make really deeply affordable housing and the adaptive reuse of a historic structure a reality, where OZ money combined with historic tax credits, FHA loans, and state and county financing tools to help complete a nice high impact, a very well situated affordable housing project there in a mid-sized city. And another example comes from Philadelphia, again, just up the road, where this Sharswood Ridge project was a nice example of how an OZ capital combined with a number of different sources of community-oriented capital to deliver not just here a large number of affordable housing units, but help bring a urgent care clinic to a medically underserved area. A grocery store is also an anchor tenant. Bring that to a food desert and help revitalize this distressed urban corner here of North Philadelphia. So we have other examples that hopefully we can get into in some Q&A and all later, but wanted to leave you with some flavor of how OZs really can be harnessed in rural settings and urban settings and mid-sized cities for impact, and especially if the public sector starts to think through how they can get engaged here. So thank you, Brad. As you foresaw, we went a little long, but I think we have enough time.
No, we until 10:10, so you're perfect. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Catherine, so much for that. I think, but the reason I wanted you guys to go first, and the biggest takeaway for me, is that this is an investor tool. I think a lot of Maryland economic development folks are used to programs like the enterprise zone, whereas more of a direct business tax credit incentive. This is just structured differently, right? So as we move towards nominations, I think it's just a different lens to see through. So thank you both so much. Yeah, no time for questions right now. We'll see how quickly I can get through my slides. And we'll either do follow-ups or have some time at the end. All right. Just to formally introduce myself for folks on the call who I don't know, I'm Brad Fallon. I'm an assistant secretary here at the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. In particular, my team will oversee this stage of the Opportunity Zone program. We, as was mentioned earlier, this is really the place where the local governments, including state governments, have a tangible impact on the administration of the program. Once we designate these zones, this is largely a program that is handled between the IRS, the Comptroller's Office, and individual investors. We will be playing a role where we will help facilitate connections between investors and interested groups. Saw some questions of that in the chat that I shot a response to. We're going to be looking forward to building that process out over the next 6 months or so before Opportunity Zone 2.0 goes live on the 1st of January, 2027. All right, to jump right in, if you could take nothing else from this call, please take the following. Every county will have until August 7th to submit their nominations for census tracts within their jurisdiction. We are asking only the counties to make these submissions. For our municipal friends, we would love to engage with all the municipalities. Candidly, where the zones are, there's 451 across the state. It's just we don't have the staff capacity. We are asking each county point of contact to be available to connect with municipalities and take their municipalities and local development groups within their jurisdiction, take their nominations and their thoughts into consideration. We will also, and I'll get into this later, be holding a series of one-on-one meetings with each county. And would encourage folks from the municipal governments and other local groups to be invited to those meetings so we can discuss them a little bit more nuance. But we are asking the counties themselves to kind of be the ushers of making these nominations through the DocuSign portal. That should have been sent out to everybody on May 7th. I know I said this at the top, but I think we've had some more people join. If you did not receive, if you're a county official, you're the head for opportunity zones. If you did not receive a packet from me on May 7th that included map, general explanations for the program, and the DocuSign portal, please email me ASAP, and we'll make sure to get that over to you by the end of the day. The last piece is what I just sort of mentioned there. I think both for the individual meetings and broadly, we strongly encourage county points of contact to engage with their municipal governments and other groups like Main Street organizations, community development corporations, or any other major group that is focused on development in the area. And some folks, that may be a university, as we see a number of these eligible census tracts intersect with our universities. This is the eligible census tract map. I will send out this slide deck following this webinar. If you click on the picture here, it'll take you directly to the interactive map. I'm actually going to do that briefly just to show you all what we have here. This is a DACD made map. There are 451 eligible census tracts determined by the IRS and provided to the state. Governor Moore can designate 25% of those. That is 113 tracts. That is quite a few. It is also down from 149 in OZ 1.0. So just because you have an opportunity zone in your jurisdiction currently does not mean that it will be automatically re-upped. There are also quite a few that are no longer eligible. So please pay attention to that. Just briefly to show out the functionality of the map, I also put this in the chat for anybody that hasn't received it in an email. You can zoom to each individual county. Let's just take Baltimore County as an example and zoom in. From there, you can see each individual census tract and some information about it. And then on the map itself, you can click into each tract. Importantly, each one of the census tracts listed here will tell you whether it is a rural or a non-rural zone. We are going to be asking that as part of the nomination process. As Keenan and Catherine mentioned, the rural opportunity zone benefit in OZ 2.0 is pretty significant. And so we would be very excited to see more nominations come from those jurisdictions. Last thing I'll show about the map briefly is that there are a number of other map layers that can be provided, that are provided by the map to see overlays. This is not a completely comprehensive list, but we do have things like designated transit-oriented development areas, which are subject to some of the recent state law changes, enough eligible jurisdictions, sustainable communities, enterprise zones, and priority funding areas. This is really to see where other incentives, whether they're tax or otherwise, that the state provides or that local governments provide, can layer on to a broader development strategy in those areas. All right, back to the presentation. A few dates to keep in mind as we move ahead. May 7th, everybody should have seen the packet. May 20th, obviously today, you're getting the overview from EIG and process details from me. In June and July, we will be meeting with individual counties. I'll go deeper into that on the next slide. And we will need those nominations no later than August 7th. Please don't think you can't submit to August 7th. As you submit as we go along, we can do more analysis and add things to the list. And then September 29th is our final deadline from the U.S. Treasury. And so we'll have a bit over a month and a half from the end of the local nomination deadline We have some analysis done on our own, but we're excited to burn through those quickly and then get that submitted to the U.S. Treasury. All right, the county meetings themselves, like I mentioned, we'll be reaching out, myself and a wonderful gentleman named Bert Bosser, who will soon join the team on May 27th, who will be the lead on this program moving forward. We'll reach out and ask for meetings. Those meetings are largely, the agenda should be set by the local jurisdiction. But what we are hoping to get out of them is to understand focus areas within each county that are eligible for Opportunity Zone designation, any particular projects in the pipeline, whether those are actively in motion or planned, or just something that the county is looking to attract investment for within eligible census tracts. We will put a very high premium on actual projects that we can designate and know that we can help and then follow up to help bring them to fruition through a number of other state tools. We'll also be asking what are strategies for development and attracting investment into nominated opportunity zones. We understand that counties often don't think by census tract. That may be an area that is much broader than the individual census tract, as long as it encompasses it. We're just looking to see if there are portions of the tract there where there is some consistent attention to development. And then any additional items that the county groups like to discuss. I sound like a broken record here, but did mention the last time, we would recommend that folks invite municipal leaders and other local leaders, though we will leave that entirely up to the jurisdiction. All right, getting into the nominations themselves and the packet, there are 4 pillars of a strong nomination: submitter and census tract ID, tract narrative and investment strategy, land use information, and project pipelines. And I'll go through each one of those in more detail. Pillar 1, submitter and tract identification. A different DocuSign submission must be made for each nominated census tract. And so at the top, you'll be asked to name the actual census tract. We need to have it this way so that we can compare all these. The county groups will be submitted on my end into a larger packet. This is the most basic information you'll provide: county name, contact information, the census tract number, and rural status. If you're uncertain about the rural status, you can check it in the eligibility map that I sent out and will be linked as part of this presentation. If you have any questions on that, just let us know. Pillar 2, and this is an important piece of it. We are asking for a 2-page maximum document to describe the census tract, anchor institutions and major employers within it, and strategies or desire for development. Those are kind of the baseline conditions. Along with those characteristics of the tract, we're asking counties to explain what their strategy for development is within that census tract. This is the number one thing that we've heard from the Opportunity Fund investors that they look for when making an investment. They look for a regulatory climate, local ordinances, and the support of local jurisdictions in any way that the local jurisdiction is supporting. That is not necessarily tax credits or grants or TIFs or anything of that nature. That may be expedited permitting. That may be just a friendly regulatory environment. There's a wide variety of what those strategies may look like. We are also interested in any public or private development actions that are already underway. We'd be interested to see how the local jurisdiction plans to market the Opportunity Zone should it be designated, and any development organizations currently active in the tract. Completely understand that is a lot of information for a 2-page document. Please remember there are over 450 tracts, and so this is going to quickly turn into several thousand pages that we're burning through. If somebody spills over onto a 3rd page, there's no points deducted or anything, but please try to keep it to 2 pages. Pillar 3 is land use information. Again, as we've talked to opportunity funds to discuss the OZ 1.0 round, the top feedback that we've gotten is that a uncertain local ordinance, particularly around land use environment, is the top challenge for pulling together Opportunity Zone investors. We're not looking to influence any land use as a part of this process, but we are looking to understand if we designate what type of investments are able to be made in that area. So we're asking for a zoning map, a short description of the types of developments that are encouraged or zoned for in that census tract, and then a little bit separate from the land use ordinances, any geographic designations that may impact designation in that census tract. I know some local jurisdictions have their own kind of geographic designations. We, of course, at DHCD have the Main Street program. We work with the Department of Transportation on transit-oriented development designation. That has been a major priority for Governor Moore, as well as enterprise zone, new market tax credit eligibility, and county master plans. I think county master plans can offer a lot of insight into the broader types of development that's both wanted and supported by the local jurisdiction. Pillar 4, a project pipeline. As I mentioned at the top, we are putting a lot of weight on this step in the process. We are asking for folks to submit a number of projects for each submission, for each census tract submission. I'll show you in just a minute what that table looks like. The information that we are requesting is mostly things like address, the timeline for development, project description, and how an opportunity zone designation may help. Candidly, of these, the OZ designation may help is probably the lowest on the totem pole, given that county leaders will only know so much about type of finances on an individual deal. But the more information, the better, particularly if we get far more nominations than census tracts that we can designate to allow us to prioritize when we're making those designations. Important to note here, projects that are desired and being pursued, but not yet tangibly planned by a developer or a group are also prompted on the application. That is a much broader request there that you'll see on the application portal. That's just generally what type of investment are you looking to bring. That's some feedback that we've received from several counties and municipalities, particularly in rural communities that are looking to attract investment, but need the tools in place to really start that conversation. Just briefly here, I did want to show what that project table looks like. Everybody, again, should have received this in the May 7th packet. If you didn't, please let me know. This is also copied on the DocuSign portal itself. We're asking that folks simply copy and paste this into a document and complete each section. These are the key sections that we would like folks to complete for each project. Each of these may be subject to the individual nature of the program. But like I said, please submit one of these for each project that you'd like to put on our radar. And then, as I mentioned, the desired but unplanned projects, much higher level, really just looking for some narrative on that front. So that's each of the steps in the application process. To just hit it home again, this is what the submission portal looks like. If you do not have access to that, please let me know. We will not accept any submissions through email alone. And importantly, because we made this public, we are going to verify that the submitter was designated by the county government. Most counties have provided a point of contact. That's who we'll look for. It's absolutely fine to change that at any time or to add other folks on there who may make a submission as a part of this. Please just shoot us an email and let us know, preferably from the point of contact, so that we can add to the list and know to expect to receive some information from you. Lastly, is just simply the county points of contact. We did reach out to each of the county executive offices last month and received responses from the majority of folks. We do have a few on here that are still TBD, or we do not have a designated point of contact, that we have been sending the information to the county executive's office. If you represent a county and you're on this call today and you see a TBD either on this slide or the next, please reach out. Let me know who is the appropriate point of contact. We'll get this listed. This will be updated on this presentation once we have it done and re-uploaded online. We'll also upload this table onto the DHCD Opportunity Zone webpage. For the municipalities that reach out, if you are uncertain who to reach out to, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. We'll send this over to you. We did, when we asked for county points of contact, we did tell them that we would be referring municipal and other local leaders to them as a part of this initiative. So they should be expecting. One heads up on this, there are 2 counties, unfortunately, in the state that do not have eligible census tracts, the opportunity zones. There is a process that the U.S. Treasury has allowed for providing additional market research that may allow a non-designated census tract to be designated. Because we have so many, we have over 450 eligible tracts, there's going to be a very high bar for that. We'll particularly look in Queen Anne's County and Carroll County, which do not have eligible zones. I will note, though, both Queen Anne's and Carroll counties do border other eligible census tracts. So when you take a look at the map, we would encourage those counties to work in coordination with their neighboring counties, since some of this development will spill over across county lines. And that's all from me, everybody. I know that there'll be more questions here. I'm going to look to get to as many as I can. I'll pull this up because we have a few minutes here. But like I said, we'll follow up on the questions in the chat as we move along. And if anybody has something more pressing or needs the initial packet that went out to the counties, please shoot me an email at my email here, and we'll get that processed. I'm just taking a look quickly to see if there's anything that's being asked many times. All right. Yeah, I think there's a spread here. So we'll go ahead and wrap up the presentation here. Please continue to put your questions in the chat or email me directly. Looking forward to working with everybody over the next few months on this. Thank you again to Economic Innovation Group, Keenan and Catherine, for your presentation. Like I mentioned in my initial email, all of this has been recorded, so the transcription and the video will be posted online. We'll also send that out to all the attendees along with the slide decks. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.